All right, well, we're moving right along here, folks. We're moving into another one of my favorite topics in sociology. That is deviance. Um, what is deviance? Well, social deviance is any transgression of socially established norms. Minor transgressions of these norms can be described as informal, and of course, formal deviance or crimes involve the violation of actual laws. Deviance isn't necessarily bad, it's just different from what the group considers to be normal. For instance, a woman having a size 13 shoe isn't bad, but it's definitely different. So it may elicit a reaction from the group that makes up that majority. And so when the sociologist uses the term deviant, they're making a social judgment, not a moral one. So anything that goes against the social norm. In this case, former deviance could be breaking the speed limit law. Well, you violated a law. If you get caught doing it, then that's an example of formal deviance. Minor transgressions, of course, I mentioned last set of lectures, acting inappropriate in a elevator. An informal transgression would be passing gas in an elevator. A formal transgression would be beating someone up in an elevator, especially if you got caught. Deviance and social control. One of the important concepts is social cohesion, which is referring to the way people form social bonds, relate to each other, and get along on a day-to-day basis. Without seeing deviant behavior, we would have a hard time classifying what is normal. This is the case with everything. You don't know what good is until you've really experienced bad. You don't know what winning is until you've experienced what losing is. So it isn't until our group norms are challenged that we come together as a group to defend these norms. For example, the tragic events following the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001 challenged a norm that many people in the United States took for granted, and that was safety. And when those norms were challenged by the attacks, new policies and procedures were put into place, for instance, airport security, to preserve that norm. That doesn't necessarily mean everybody likes the new policies that were put into place. And as a matter of fact, those policies would not have been able to be put into place if that norm wasn't challenged, i.e., safety wasn't challenged. The Patriot Act that followed curtailed many of our civil liberties, and that same act was tried to be passed in the Clinton administration and went down as a resounding failure. But the mood had changed, the norms had changed, and because of those changing norms, the population was willing to accept a new set of policies that, quote unquote, normally they would not have accepted. Deviance and social control it's an important aspect of one of the biggies in sociology, that is Emil Durkheim. Durkheim theorized that social cohesion is established either through mechanical solidarity, which is based on the sameness of society's parts or members, or organic solidarity, which is based on the interdependence of specialized parts or members. If you think of the United States, we are a rather diverse group. However, if you think of smaller groups like college students at your school, you might find many similarities. In many societies, you can find examples of both mechanical and organic solidarity. But when Durkheim was looking at it specifically, he was trying to understand what the social changes were going on in his era. And so that mechanical solidarity was really in reference to tribal societies, pagan societies, those that lived off the land, societies that were more based on feudalism. And in that society, sameness of the parts or members was the defining characteristic. Organic solidarity, on the other hand, was more in reference to the newly developing urban landscape. So as people were being moved off the land, as we talked about previously with the enclosure movement, they were being moved into the cities, and this new interdependence was taking shape, and he saw it as a more organic way of holding people together. This interdependence, much like a body, where you have a liver and you have a heart and you have kidneys and a pancreas and all kinds of stuff that work together to create the whole. Well, that's what Durkheim was drawing off of, this analogy of the body, to explain how this new specialized, diverse, and complex society that was forming during his time. When we think about deviance and social control, we really need to think about types of justice. And when we think about justice, we think about punitive and rehabilitative justice. Punitive justice focuses on making the violator suffer and thus defines the boundaries of acceptable behavior, whereas rehabilitative justice examines the specific circumstances of an individual transgressor and attempts to find ways to rehabilitate him or her. One of the things you might want to think about when you're working your way through this set of lectures is, do you think we have more punitive justice or rehabilitative justice in the United States? And what are the pros and cons of each? Rehabilitation has different degrees of success or failure depending on the crime committed. However, even though rehabilitation is usually less expensive than incarceration, we tend to see more sentences of incarceration than rehabilitation. Why do you think that is? Are there certain crimes that you think should receive more rehabilitation than incarceration? This is a big discussion in how we deal with illegal drug use or possession. One of the things that these two strategies, the punitive justice is very common in the criminal justice system when it comes to drugs and illegal possession. Just incarcerate them. You get caught with whatever it is, then you go to jail. But the rehabilitative justice aspect of it, or something more like a drug court that says, oh, this is a minor transgression, we don't want to destroy somebody's life, let's run them through a drug court program, see if they come out on the other side of it, accomplishing whatever we set them on. And if they do, well, then we'll just keep them on the path that they were going. Whether, which one you like better is really up to you. I personally like the rehabilitative justice strategy, but I also realize that's not always going to work. Social control is, of course, the set of mechanisms that create normative compliance in individuals. Normative compliance being the act of abiding by society's norms or simply following the rules of group life. So we generally don't question why we comply with society's norms. Excuse me. For instance, on the first day of class, everyone probably came into the room without thinking about it and automatically sat down in one of the seats. Why exactly we use this agreement is not even brought into question. The question is, why do you follow it? Could there be a better arrangement? Well, of course there could be. You're taking an online course and you're deciding that's a better arrangement for you than the traditional go to class, sit in the classroom and listen to the professor speak format. At the grocery store, why do we use checkout lanes and cashiers? Could there be a better, more efficient system? Well, many of the grocery stores think, at least in some respects, there is, and that is you check it out yourself. But the reason that we just go along with it is because it's the status quo, and most of us don't question why these systems are in place. We just follow the rules. Most of us follow the rules, folks. That's just the way it is. When you're talking about dealing with social control, you want to talk about sanctions, informal and formal social sanctions. Informal social sanctions are unspoken rules and expectations about the behavior of individuals, and they help maintain a base level of order and cohesion in society and form a foundation for social control. Earlier we were talking about norm breaching or norm breaking, norm violation. We said that if you break an important norm, you'll get a bigger response than if you break a relatively unimportant norm. The response that you receive could be an informal social sanction. If someone tells you that you're supposed to or not supposed to act that way, dress that way, or talk that way, then they're trying to get you to conform to what they consider to be a norm. Whether you conform or not is up to you. The stronger individual chooses to not conform if they believe enough in what they're doing. This really becomes an issue of how comfortable you are in yourself and how willing you are to defend the decisions that you make about yourself in reference to the social norms that govern society. And some people are more comfortable than others being different. But it does have its consequences. Some examples of formal social control include laws and authority of police officers, of course. Back to that idea of speeding. Well, your friend might tell you, don't drive so fast, you're going to get pulled over. Now, while your friend doesn't have the authority to make you drive slower, he or she is reinforcing a norm and reminding you of the formal social control that legally enforces that norm. It's not until you're driving past a police officer at more than probably 5 miles over the speed limit that you actually get pulled over, and the formal sanctioning, the formal aspect of social control starts to take shape. And that starts with graduated sanctions, the first sanction being a fine. Now, it might not seem like a small fine, but it's a fine nevertheless. If you continue to be caught speeding, the next set of sanctions could be a little bit more severe. Removal of a driver's license, possibly. And then jail time. So the idea of amping up sanctions as the transgressor continues to violate the social norms is part of our criminal justice code.